Deep in the mountains of West Virginia, where the coal roads stop and the hollow swallow sound, there is a door set into a rock face that does not appear on any map. It has been locked for years. A 16-year-old girl stands in front of it with a rusted key and $4 and everything she owns in a canvas bag. Behind her, an orphanage that laughed when she left. Ahead, a cave that a dead woman spent 40 years building in secret alone, unrecognized for someone she had never met. The key turns. The door swings open. And inside a mountain in 1938, in a place where nothing should grow, light falls from the ceiling in angles that have no right to exist. She steps through. She does not yet know there is a letter hidden inside, that it has her name on it, that someone tried to send it 3 years ago, and that it was sent back unopened. 5 o'clock in the morning, and Nora Vane was standing in front of a mirror that had seen better decades. The glass was wavy at the edges, made her look slightly wrong, slightly tilted, which was, she supposed, accurate enough. She wasn't checking her hair, wasn't checking her dress, the brown wool one that traveled well and showed dirt less than anything else she owned, which was why she'd bought it 3 years ago when she stopped caring about colors and started caring about practical. She was checking whether she could stand straight. That was all. Just could she stand straight today? Could she hold her spine like it meant something? Could she walk into that depot and stand on whatever they'd arranged for women to stand on and look at strangers looking at her and not let her face do the thing her face had been trying to do for 3 years, which was collapse inward like a house with a bad foundation? Yes, she decided, she could. She turned from the mirror before she changed her mind. This was the second time. The first time had been 2 years ago in a town called Greer's Crossing, where 8 women had stood on a church platform, and Nora had been last chosen and then not chosen at all. And a man named Hewitt had put $2 in her hand afterward and said he was sorry, but he needed a woman who could give him sons, and he hoped she understood. And she had said yes. She understood completely, and then walked back to Mrs. Donnie's boarding house and sat on the edge of her narrow bed until she could feel her feet again. She hadn't cried. She'd cried plenty before that, when Thomas Miller put the money on the table, when her father didn't look up from his newspaper, when her mother closed the door, not slammed. It closed it soft and final, like closing a room you weren't going to use anymore. By the time she got to Greer's Crossing, the crying was done. What was left was something harder. Not anger, not quite. More like the thing that's under anger once it burns through. The thing that says, fine. All right. What next? What next was Millerton? What next was today? She picked up her carpet bag from the foot of the bed. It wasn't heavy. It had never been heavy. 3 dresses, 1 good and 2 practical. Her mother's Bible that she hadn't opened in a year but couldn't leave behind. A hairbrush with a cracked handle. A bar of yellow soap she'd been saving for something and hadn't used yet because it turned out there was always something else to save it for. Light as resignation, that bag. Light as the particular efficiency of a woman who has stopped planning ahead. She went downstairs, paid Mrs. Donnie for the room, and walked out into September. The depot was 3 blocks east. She knew the way. The platform had been built against the side of the freight office, which was the largest building in Millerton, with the most wall space, which was apparently the logic behind choosing it. 10 women. A wooden riser about 2 feet off the ground, long enough that they could stand in a row without touching. Bunting along the edge in red and white, which struck Nora as aggressively festive for the occasion. A crowd already gathered. Nora counted without meaning to. 50 people, maybe 60. Women in Sunday dresses. Men in their good hats. 2 boys sitting on a fence post at the back eating something out of a paper bag, watching with the uncomplicated interest of people who had no stake in the outcome. Lucky. To have no stake. The other 9 women were already there when she arrived. She'd met 2 of them at Mrs. Donnie's the night before. Catherine from Pennsylvania, pretty in a delicate way, with blonde hair she'd spent an hour arranging. And a widow named Frances Garrett from Missouri, with 2 boys she was trying not to look at in the crowd, her mouth tight with the effort of being hopeful. Nora nodded to both of them. Neither said much. That was fine. A man named Burl Dempson stood at the front of the platform, papers in hand, dressed like he was selling something expensive and wanted everyone to know it. Silver watch chain, vest buttons that strained slightly. The voice of a man who'd spent his career making things sound better than they were and had gotten quite good at it. "Ladies," he said to the women. "Gentlemen," he said to the crowd. "Fine women here." He spread his hands. "Everyone trained in the domestic arts. Everyone of good character and sound constitution." Nora thought domestic arts, as if she were a decorative item. She fixed her eyes on the flat horizon past the edge of town, where the railroad tracks disappeared into heat shimmer, and she put her hands flat against her sides and she breathed. Just breathed. "Miss Catherine from Pennsylvania," Dempson's voice boomed. "Can read, write, and cipher. Accomplished in needlework." A man with silver at his temples stepped forward. Young enough, steady enough. Catherine came down off the platform with her relief showing like a bruise, pretty and visible. 1. Mrs. Garrett from Missouri. Dempson moved to Frances. Widowed but proven fertile. 2 healthy boys. Frances Garrett was off the platform so fast she was practically running into the arms of a German farmer who looked solid as good timber. Her boys whooped from somewhere in the crowd. 2. The next 6 went quickly. Sarah to a banker's son. Louise to the telegraph operator. The widow Mercer to a man in his 40s who seemed to know her from somewhere already. Mary Elizabeth to someone's cousin from Austin. And 2 more after that, names Nora hadn't learned yet, taken by men she didn't see clearly because she'd stopped looking at the selections and gone back to the horizon. 8. 9. And then the platform was just her. She heard it start soft. Wind through corn. Then building to something uglier. A snicker. A real laugh. Somebody saying something she didn't quite catch, but the word returned, floated over the rest, and the laughter swelled around it. Burl Dempson's face had gone the color of a ripe tomato. He shuffled his papers. "Miss Miller, that is Miss Vane." He was flustered, using her old name, correcting himself. "Miss Vane has extensive experience in household management, is accomplished in—" Someone shouted, "Experienced! Just can't close the deal." The laughter crested. Nora's knees wanted to buckle. She did not let them. She fixed her eyes on the horizon, and she thought about nothing. Not Thomas, not her father's newspaper, not the door closing soft and final. Nothing. She was a woman standing on a wooden platform in September sun, and she was going to keep standing on it until someone told her she could get down, because the alternative was giving the people laughing exactly what they were waiting for. And she had stopped giving people that a long time ago. Her hands had clenched at her sides. She noticed distantly that her nails had broken skin on her left palm. Small crescent marks. The kind you got when you were holding on to something that wasn't there. She was still looking at the horizon when she heard the boots. Steady. Unhurried. On wood. The laughter didn't die all at once. It stuttered. Then slowed. Then stopped completely. Not gradually. Just suddenly not going anymore. She didn't look immediately. She kept her eyes on the horizon for one more breath. Then she looked. He was tall in a way that came from work rather than from trying to be imposing. Dark hair, some gray at the temples. A face weathered by sun and something else, something that lived behind his eyes and was harder to name than sun damage. His clothes were clean and worn thin at the elbows. He moved like a man who had somewhere specific to be and had simply decided this was it. He stopped at the base of the platform, and he didn't look at her face. That was the thing she noticed first. Not a polite scan, not an assessment, not the looking for defects examination she'd gotten used to. He looked at her hands that were at her sides, the left one with the small crescent marks. He looked at her hands for a moment. Then he looked up and met her eyes, not with pity, not with calculation, not with the expression of a man inspecting livestock, just looking, like a man who had spotted something the rest of the room had decided wasn't there. Burl Dempson recovered first. "Mr. Calloway." He mopped his face with a handkerchief already past its best days. "I wasn't aware you were that as I didn't you weren't on my list of interested." "Wasn't interested." The man's voice was rough, not unkind, just unpolished like wood before it had been worked. "Changed my mind just now." The crowd had gone so quiet that Nora could hear the railroad tracks ticking in the heat. "Mr. Calloway," Dempson tried again, shuffling his papers. "I feel obligated to inform you of certain circumstances regarding Miss Vane's previous. There are some things you should know before know already." Dempson blinked. "I beg your pardon." "Know already." Set Calloway kept his eyes on Nora, not on Dempson. On her. "Saw the listing 3 weeks ago. Read all of it." The crowd murmured. Nora processed this. He knew 3 weeks ago. He knew, and he came anyway. He came anyway on purpose. She didn't know what to do with that. The last 3 years had not prepared her for that particular piece of information, and her mind was doing something strange with it, filing it sideways, unable to find the right drawer. "Well now," Dempson said with the nervous cheer of a man trying to salvage a situation that had escaped his control. "That's certainly, if you're sure, she coming or not." He said it to Nora, not to Dempson. Direct, not unkind. Nora's mouth opened. No words came. She had been called barren in 3 counties, had been returned like damaged goods by a man who'd held her hand at a church altar, had stood on a platform before this one and watched the whole room reach its conclusion about her and announce it out loud, and this man had read the listing 3 weeks ago, and come anyway, on purpose. She made her voice work. "Yes," she said. He nodded once, then turned and started walking back through the crowd. She grabbed her carpet bag, climbed down off the platform herself. Not because no one offered, but because she didn't need it. She'd been climbing on and off things her whole life. The townspeople pulled back as she passed. Not hostile exactly, just confused. Like a show that had ended wrong and nobody was sure whether to applaud or ask for their money back. She heard it behind her. That's Set Calloway, taking on another man's, fool's errand. She'll disappoint him too. She kept walking. Steady. When she reached his wagon, practical, undecorated, built entirely for work, he stopped beside it. Didn't reach for her bag. Didn't take her arm. Didn't do any of the things that men did when they were being helpful in ways that also communicated exactly who was in charge. He just stopped and waited. She understood immediately. He was giving her the choice. Still, even now. She threw her bag in the back, grabbed the sideboard, hauled herself up. Her boot caught in her skirt and she nearly went sideways, but she managed it. When she settled on the bench, something in his expression shifted. Not approval exactly, more like noted. He climbed up beside her, took the reins. They rolled forward, the crowd fell away behind them. The silence that settled in as they left the edge of town was different from the silence on the platform. That had been the quiet before execution. This was something she didn't have a name for yet, but she could breathe in it. She could breathe. As the last buildings of Millerton disappeared behind them, Nora finally spoke. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. The mules found their rhythm. Dust coated everything in fine, pale powder. "You didn't beg?" he said finally, without looking at her. "Whole room waiting for it. You just stood there." She thought about that. "I ran out of begging," she said. "A while back." He made a sound that might have been acknowledgement. They rode. The land opened up around them flat and enormous and honest. The way flat things were. Honest. Nothing hiding behind anything else. Everything exactly what it looked like. Grass, the color of old straw. Cottonwoods along the dry creek lines. Sky so wide and blue it almost looked like an argument. "Mr. Calloway." "Set." She looked at him sideways. He was watching the road ahead, face giving nothing in particular away. "Set." She tried the name, plain, Didn't fit in her mouth yet, but would. There are things you should know about why I was available a second time. Know some of it. Not all. You want to tell it, tell it. She looked at the road. My first husband, returned me after 3 years. Doctor said I couldn't have children. He wanted children. He was very civil about it. She paused. He left money on the table and explained the situation to my father, and my father explained it to me. And your family. My father didn't look up from his newspaper. She kept her voice level. This was the same voice she'd practiced. The one that made facts into facts rather than wounds. My mother closed the door on her way out. She didn't slam it. She just closed it. The wagon hit a rut. Neither of them reached for the other. That's the worst part, he said after a moment. She looked at him. The soft closing, he said, harder than a slam. She turned back to the road. He understood that. She hadn't expected him to understand that. Cook, he said. The change of subject was so abrupt she almost laughed. Almost. Yes. Wash clothes. Yes. Know which end of a chicken lays eggs? This time something did move in her face, just briefly. The back end generally. He made the sound again. The almost not quite sound. The ranch, she started. 8 miles out. 140 acres, most of it scrub. House has 4 rooms and a lean-to. He shifted the reins to one hand. The lean-to. Built it last month. Built it? She stopped. Before you knew who was coming. Before I knew who was coming. He kept his eyes on the road. Figured whoever it was would want a room of her own, with a lock on the inside. Nora looked at the side of his face. A lock on the inside. A room she controlled. She didn't finish that sentence. House is rough, he said. Not pretty. Functional. Don't have money for pretty. Pretty never did me any favors, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, ranch needs 2 people. Can't run it alone. Tried for 3 years. I know, she said. She meant I understand. I understand this is practical. Also, he said and stopped. She waited. Also, I'd rather know who's there when I come in at night, he said. He said it the way a man said things he'd thought about for a long time and was deciding right now whether to say out loud. Been coming into an empty house since... He stopped again. For 3 years. That's all. That's all. She understood the weight in those 2 words. The weight of 3 years of empty. They were halfway there when Burl Dempson appeared at the creek crossing, sitting his horse in the shade with the patience of a man who had a second hand to play. Nora felt Set go tight beside her. Not dramatically, just the way a rope went tight. Dempson tipped his hat. Mr. Calloway. Then pointedly, Miss Vane. Dempson. Set's voice was flat. You got your fee. We got our business. Well now! Dempson's horse danced sideways. That's where you might be wrong. See, there are documents, waivers, legal protections for you, Mr. Calloway, given the particular circumstances of Miss Vane's previous... I'm sitting right here, Mr. Dempson. Both men looked at her. She had said it before she'd fully decided to say it. But she kept her voice steady, kept her back straight. Whatever you think needs saying, she said, say it to my face. I'm sitting right here, not behind you, not a topic, a person. So look at me when you say it. Dempson's mouth opened, closed. Miss Vane. Plain language, she said. Or none at all. Set clicked his tongue at the mules, started them moving. Dempson nudged his horse sideways to block the path. Mr. Calloway, this woman cannot have children. It's documented. You take her on, you're taking on a lifetime of empty house, empty nursery. Set the brake, stepped down off the wagon. Didn't run, didn't hurry. Just stepped down and walked toward Dempson with the deliberation of a man who had already decided. Empty. He said the word like he was tasting it, like it was something he'd already eaten and knew the flavor of. He stopped beside Dempson's horse, one hand on the bridle. "You want to talk about empty?" Dempson swallowed hard enough to see. "My house already got empty," Set said. 3 years ago. Got 2 graves side by side to prove it." He looked up at Dempson with the eyes of a man who had been all the way to the bottom of something and come back up and was now very calm about it. "You think this woman's going to make that worse?" Dempson said nothing. "Move your horse," Set said, "or I'll move it." Dempson moved his horse. Set walked back to the wagon, climbed up, took the reins. "Sorry about that," he said. "You didn't have to." "Yeah." A pause. "I did." They guided the mules down to the creek. The animals waded in up to their knees, drinking slow in the afternoon heat. Set climbed down to check their feet, running his hands down each leg with the kind of patience that couldn't be faked. Nora watched him. "You should know," she said to his back. What he said. "About the children. It's true." He straightened up. Water dripped from his hands. He didn't turn right away. "You should know," he said to the creek, "that my wife died trying to give me one. Baby, too." He wiped his hands on his pants. "Took a full day. I spent it sitting outside the bedroom door, useless as anything." He turned. "So if you're worried I'm looking for a broodmare," he said, "you can stop." The words were plain, hard, delivered without cruelty and without comfort, just facts smooth from being turned over in his hands for 3 years. Nora looked at him. "Why take a wife at all?" she asked. "Ranch needs 2 people." He came back to the wagon. "Said that already, and—" He stopped with his foot on the step, looked at the horizon. "A man alone on a property gets ideas. Men in town start making offers. Women with casseroles. Easier to have a wife. Safer all around." "Safer." She held that. "I work for my keep," she said. "I don't expect a—" "I know." He climbed up. "Don't expect either." The ranch appeared as they crested the last hill. A low house of rough lumber and cedar posts. A barn. A corral. No garden. No flowers. No evidence that any woman had ever arranged anything here. But solid. Everything about it said solid. Set showed her through quickly stove with a sticking damper pump at the kitchen sink root cellar smokehouse. Then he pushed open the door at the back of the kitchen. The lean-to. Narrow. Private. A simple iron bed with a corn shuck mattress, a washstand, hooks for clothes. A small window with flour sack curtains that someone had hemmed but not decorated. 2 doors, both with bolts on the inside. "Lock there," he said, pointing. "And there. Nobody bothers you here." She set her carpet bag on the bed. The room smelled of new lumber. Her room. That bolt on the inside of the door said so. "Chickens need feed," he said, already backing out. "Grains in the barn, preserved goods in the cellar. Make yourself at home." "You're leaving now." He looked at her with the eyes of a man who had a ranch to run and 3 years of deferred maintenance to work through. "Got to check the south fence before dark," he said. "Might not be back till supper. Maybe after." She thought, "I've been alone before." She thought, "This is different." She thought, "Bolt the door and find out." "Go," she said. He went. She heard the wagon rattling away, moving faster now that he was pointed at work. Nora stood in the middle of the kitchen for a moment. Then she set her carpet bag down in the lean-to. Then she came back out and looked at the kitchen. The stove that needed blacking. The table with the worn spot on one side where someone had sat for years. The shelves with the mismatched dishes. The coffee pot with old grounds she could smell from across the room. She tied on her apron. And she went to work. Because work was the thing she knew. Had always known. The thing that said, "You are here. You are useful. You exist in a way that takes up space and does something with it." She pumped water until it ran clear. Found soap and rags and started with the table. The wood was good underneath the grime. Pine boards that would shine given time. In the root cellar, she found potatoes, onions, a jar of preserved peaches that looked like sunset in glass. The smokehouse had salt pork and a ham that might be good. The chickens complained when she fed them, but accepted her authority eventually. She built up the fire in the stove. The damper stuck, but if you lifted and twisted at the same time it gave. She had salt pork frying and beans soaking for tomorrow when she heard horses in the yard. Not one, several. She wiped her hands and went to the window and saw shapes moving in the dusk. Men's voices, words she couldn't make out. Then footsteps on the porch, the door opening, Set in the doorway, covered in dust, and the end of a long day. And behind him, 3 men she didn't know, equally worn out, equally looking at her, with the particular expression of men who had not expected to find a woman in this kitchen. "Got company," Set said. His eyes moved to the clean table, the organized shelves, the food on the stove. Something shifted in them, just briefly. "Needed help fixing Patterson's fence. Fire jumped a break east of here." The biggest of the men, red beards showing through the trail grime, smiled in a way that showed too many teeth. "Well now, Set, didn't tell us you had company." "This is my wife." Set's voice crossed the room flat and clean. "Nora." The word wife hung in the air between her and those 3 men like a fence. Redbeard's smile recalculated. "Wife since when you got a wife, Set?" "Since today." Set moved past them to the wash basin, started scrubbing. "Fire contained for now. Wind dies down, should hold till morning. You boys best get back to your own places." "Hold on." The second man, lean and sunburned, pushed forward. "We've been fighting that fire all day. Least you could do is—" "Wife had a long day too." Set positioned himself between her and them. Casual, final. "Just arrived from town. Appreciate your help with the fire. Tell Patterson I'll come by tomorrow." The 3 men looked at each other. The oldest one, gray at his temples, cleared his throat. "Come on, boys. Man wants his wedding night." They left, boots heavy on the porch. Redbeard said something she couldn't make out, and a man laughed, but the sound faded with them into the dark. Set stood at the window a moment, watching their lanterns bob away. Then he turned around. He looked at what she'd done. The clean kitchen, the food on the stove, the table she'd scrubbed to bare wood, the organized shelves, the coffee pot washed and ready. She waited for him to say something about it. He didn't say anything about it. "Sit down," she said. "You look ready to fall over." He sat. She put a plate in front of him. Salt pork, fried potatoes with wild onions she'd found by the back door, cornbread. He took a bite, closed his eyes, chewed slowly. "Been 3 years since anyone cooked in this kitchen besides me," he said. "Shows in the grease stains." The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. They ate across from each other in the lamplight. Outside, the night pressed down on the Texas plains and said nothing. Inside, the lamp threw shadows on the walls, and the stove ticked as it cooled, and 2 people who did not know each other ate a meal together for the first time. She collected the plates when he was done. He sat at the table while she washed them, not talking, his hands flat on the table. "Those men," she said, "they'll be back." "No." His voice came certain and final. "They know you're here now. Word'll spread before morning." A pause. The red-bearded one. "I noticed him." "Best you keep that distance." "Planning on it." She dried the last plate. He stood, joints creaking. "Lock the door tonight," he said. "Both of them." "Were you expecting trouble?" "No," he said, "but lock them anyway." He went to his room. She stood in the kitchen for a moment after she heard his door close. Then she went to the lean-to. Bolted the door. Bolted the outside door. Checked both. Then stood in the middle of her room, her bolt, her door, and breathed. Just breathed. The house settled around her. Boards contracting in the night cool. Wind pushing soft at the walls. The faint smell of smoke from the prairie fire still somewhere out there, miles away now. Through the wall she heard him moving. Boot heels on the floorboards. The sound of a man getting ready for sleep. And then the groan of the bed as he lay down. Then nothing. Then breathing that turned steady and deep. She'd expected to lie awake for hours. She was asleep before the last lamp went out. And in the morning, before he came downstairs, she had coffee on the stove and 2 cups on the table. 2. Not 1. 2. She didn't examine why. She just put them there. And when his boots sounded on the stairs and his hand pushed open the kitchen door, she was already at the stove with her back to him, and she didn't turn around. She heard him stop. She heard him look at the table. She heard him sit down. He didn't say anything about the 2nd cup. He just reached for it and drank. And that was how it started. Not with romance. Not with promises. Not with any of the soft and complicated words that people said to each other in different lives. With 2 cups of coffee on a table in early morning Texas light, which was, if you knew anything about Nora Vane, considerably more than she'd expected. The first week passed without ceremony, which was fine. Ceremony was for people who needed things announced. Nora didn't need things announced. She needed a functional stove and a working pump and enough sleep to make the next day possible, and she had all 3, so she kept her head down and she worked. Set did the same. They occupied the house the way 2 people occupied a shared workspace, each aware of the other, each making small adjustments without discussing them, each learning the shape of the other's habits by feel, by not bumping into things. He left the water bucket full every morning before she woke. She left coffee on the stove until she heard him come in from morning chores. He didn't explain the bucket. She didn't explain the coffee. They were just facts about the household now, things that existed. She fixed the squeaky board by the lean-to door after the 3rd night when she woke to the sound of her own footstep at 2 in the morning. Didn't ask permission. Didn't announce it. Just found the hammer and the nail and fixed it in the morning before he came in for breakfast. He looked at the floor when he came in. Didn't say anything, but he nodded at it. One slow nod, the kind that meant noted. Good. Continuing on. And she understood that this was how it worked between them. Not words. Acts. Small acts that said, I see this place. I am paying attention. I am here. She organized the root cellar on the 5th day because the previous system, if it could be called a system, made no sense. Preserved goods on the same shelf as seed packets and an old boot that had wandered in from somewhere and never wandered back out. She pulled everything, swept the shelves, reorganized by type and usage frequency. The boot she set outside by the barn in case it belonged to something. When Seth came in for dinner and went to get the salt pork and found it where she'd put it instead of where it had been, he paused, then found it, then came back to the table. Reorganize the cellar, she said without turning from the stove. I noticed, he said. That was the whole conversation. It was enough. The work itself was enormous. She'd known a ranch was work, knew it the way you knew the sun was hot before you went outside as an abstract fact, but experiencing it was different. The chickens needed feeding and watering and checking for illness and had strong opinions about routines. The kitchen garden she'd inherited from whoever had tried to tend it last was mostly done for the season, but she salvaged what she could. The house itself had accumulated 3 years of bachelor dust in places dust had no right to be. She cleaned it. Not all at once. Steadily. Finding the path. Getting there eventually. And she cooked. Because you had to eat, and she'd always found cooking clarifying in the same way some people found prayer clarifying. It made you specific. It required you to be in one place doing one thing, making one decision at a time. Salt or no salt. More heat or less. Now or wait. She made bread on the 6th morning. First bread she'd made since Thomas's kitchen, which she tried not to think about. It came out right. She put it on the table. When Seth came in at noon, he sat down and tore off a piece while it was still warm without asking, and ate it standing up with the unself-conscious appetite of a man who had not eaten well in some time. He didn't say it was good. He went back for a second piece, which was better than saying it was good. The second week was when she found her rhythm. Up at 4:30, coffee, stove, chickens before the sun broke the horizon because they were calmer that way. Then kitchen work while the morning was cool enough to make it tolerable. Then whatever the day's larger project was. Then dinner at noon if Set was close enough to come in. He usually was then afternoon work until the light thinned out. He brought her leather gloves from town on the 9th day, left them on the table. No note, no explanation. She came in from the garden with her hands in the state they'd been in for a week, blisters on the blisters, palms going rough in ways that would probably stay rough. And there were the gloves. She put them on. They fit. He'd looked at her hands at the depot. That first moment. That was what he'd looked at. He'd remembered the size of them. She stood in the kitchen with the gloves on her hands and felt something she hadn't felt in some time. Not gratitude exactly. Something about being seen in a specific way that didn't require her to perform anything. She went back outside and kept working. It was on a Thursday afternoon, the beginning of the second week, when she saw the water trough. The main one on the south side of the barn, the big one that the cattle came to. She'd noticed it was low, which made sense given they'd had no rain in 2 weeks, but she'd also noticed there was something wrong with the feed pipe. Something wrong with the whole wood fitting where the pipe came through. Rotten. Not all the way through, but enough. She found Set at the south fence mending a stretch that had been complaining since she arrived. "Water trough on the south barn," she said. "The feed fitting. Needs replacing before it goes." He looked at her. Then he came to look at the trough. He crouched down, examined the fitting, pressed on it with 2 fingers to check the give. "Week, maybe 2, he said. "Sooner," she said. "Might have the wood for it." He straightened up. "Have to check." He went to check. She followed because she wanted to understand where things were in the barn, not because she needed to hover over him. But when he found the board, he needed a good piece of cedar and brought it over and started working on the fitting. That's when she saw it. His hands. The left one. The way it shook when he was lining up the first cut. Not badly. Not so that you'd notice if you weren't paying attention. But she was paying attention. It happened again when he tried to hold the fitting in place to test the fit. Just a tremor. Small. There and then gone. His jaw went tight, the look of a man trying to control something that wasn't fully under his control. He put the fitting down. Tried again. The shake again. She didn't say anything about it. She didn't ask if he was all right. Didn't suggest he might need help. Didn't do any of the things that made a person feel observed when they wanted to feel invisible. She just walked over and held the fitting in place with both hands steady while he made the cut. He looked at her hands on the wood. Then he made the cut. It was a clean cut. They replaced the fitting in about 20 minutes, working without talking, without getting in each other's way. When it was done, he fitted the piece into place, and she held it while he drove the nails. They stepped back. The trough filled properly. Set looked at his hands for a moment. "Happens sometimes," he said. He stopped. "Since a while back." "I know," she said. She used his words. The exact words he'd said to her at the depot when Dempson wanted to talk about things that were already said. He looked at her. A long look, trying to figure out if she meant something by it. She met it without flinching. "I know," she said again. Simpler. Just, "I know." Not a problem. Not something that needs explaining. Just a thing that is. He looked away. "Thanks," he said. "You'd have done it eventually," she said, which was true and was also kind without being soft. He picked up the tools. She went back to the garden. Neither of them mentioned it again. Rex Hadley came on a Tuesday. Set had gone to the east pasture before sunrise, checking a section of fence that had been bothering him all week. He'd be back by noon, he'd said. She'd have dinner ready by noon, she'd said. She was pulling a batch of bread out of the oven when she heard hoofbeats. One horse. She looked out the kitchen window. Man she didn't know, riding slow. Not the purposeful slowness of Set moving between tasks. A different kind of slow. The kind that meant he was looking at something. The house. He was looking at the house. She watched him come into the yard. Medium build, heavy set across the shoulders, reddish hair showing under his hat. He had the kind of face that might have been friendly once and had curdled into something else through years of not being told no. He dismounted at the fence, didn't tie his horse, walked toward the porch. Nora stepped back from the window. She did not go to the door. She went to the kitchen table and she put her hands flat on it and she breathed and she thought through the situation. Set was east. She didn't know this man. He hadn't called out, hadn't announced himself. Just walked toward the porch in the unhurried manner of a man who is used to arriving places and being let in. She picked up the bread knife. Not dramatically, not because she'd decided something, just because it was there and it was heavy and it fit her hand, and she felt better with it there. He knocked. She didn't answer. "Hello." His voice was easy, friendly almost, the friendliness of something performing friendliness. "Anyone home looking for Calloway?" She said nothing. She stood in the kitchen with the bread knife in her hand and she waited. A long pause. Then footsteps on the porch. The door handle moved. She'd bolted it that morning. Not because she expected anything. Just because she'd developed the habit of bolting the door when she was alone and she intended to keep that habit. The handle moved again, then stopped. The footsteps went back across the porch, down the steps. She heard him walk around the side of the house, heard him stop near the kitchen window which had the curtains she'd pulled across it after she stepped back. She did not move. She stood in her kitchen with the bread knife, and she waited. After a while, she heard his horse leave. She stood there for another few minutes after the sound was gone. Then she put the bread knife down. Then she sat at the table. Her hands weren't shaking. She noticed that specifically. They weren't shaking, which meant something. Which meant the 3 years of learning to stand up straight while things happened around her had installed some kind of foundation she hadn't been fully aware of. She was furious, though. Quietly, completely furious. Not scared. Furious. Furious that a stranger had come to her door and tried the handle. Furious that she'd had to stand in her own kitchen with a bread knife. Furious at the presumption of it. The casual presumption that a woman alone was a thing you could just come and try the handle on. She got up, went back to her work. When Set came in at noon, she put food on the table and sat down and said, "Man came by this morning. Tried the door when I didn't answer. Went around the side." He stopped. "Red hair," she said. "Heavy through the shoulders. Didn't give a name." Set set down his fork. "Rex Hadley. I assumed it was a name I should know." "You should." He picked the fork back up, but he wasn't eating. "Has ideas about certain things, about what he's owed." I gathered. "He won't come back." She looked at him. "He won't," Set said. "I'll see to it. I'm not asking you to fight anyone on my account. Not fighting. Just making clear." He ate a bite. "There's a difference." She thought about this. "All right," she said. He saw to it. She didn't ask how. He came back that evening with his knuckles bruised on his right hand, and she put water on, and found the cloth without being asked, and left it on the table, and he wrapped his hand himself, and they ate supper, and she said nothing about it, and neither did he. Rex Hadley did not come back, not in the daylight. The first night was a Thursday. She was asleep when she heard it. Not from the front, from the back. The back door to the lean-to, the outside one, the one that opened onto the side yard. Someone trying the latch. Quietly, carefully, the way you tried a latch when you didn't want anyone to know you were trying it. Nora was awake before she was fully awake, some part of her already calculating, before her mind caught up. She lay still, listened. The bolt was in. Both bolts. She checked them both before bed. She checked them every night. The latch moved again. Patient. Testing. She didn't make a sound. She reached under the mattress for the bread knife she'd started keeping there 3 days ago because she didn't know if she'd need it, and she'd decided the cost of not needing it was lower than the cost of needing it and not having it. She held the knife. She waited. After a long time, long enough that she counted her own heartbeats to stay calm, the sound stopped. She lay still until she heard nothing outside. Then, nothing. Then more nothing. She did not sleep again that night. She lay in her narrow bed in her narrow room with the knife in her hand, and she looked at the ceiling, and she thought about the bolt on the door. The bolt Set had built into the door before he knew who was coming. Before he knew anything about her except that whoever came would want a room with a lock. He'd known that. He'd known that before he knew anything else. In the morning, she told Set. Same way as before. Same flat voice. Same level eyes. Just facts. A man tried the back door of the lean-to last night. Tried it quietly. Tried it for a while. She watched Set's face do what it did when something settled into certainty for him, that particular settling like ground after rain. Today, he said. Today? She agreed. He was gone for most of the morning. Came back at noon. His right hand had not improved. He ate his dinner. Then he said, "You'll have the trouble with Vera Stout now, too." She looked up. Neighbor, half-mile north. She and Rex. He stopped. Reconsidered. She talks to Rex Hadley. Not personal. Just passes time of day. She told someone in town you were here alone some mornings. Rex would have heard. She knew she was passing that along. No, he said, which she could tell was an honest answer and not a protective one. Vera doesn't usually think that far ahead about other people's situations. She thinks ahead about her own. It's not malice, it's just not thinking. She'll come see you, probably soon. Wants to know who you are. Wonderful, Nora said without enthusiasm. She was May's friend. Nora looked at him. He looked at his plate. That was the first time he'd said the name. In all of 2 weeks of sharing this house and its silence, that was the first time May's name had come out of him. He didn't say anything else about it. She didn't ask. Not yet. Vera Stout came on a Saturday morning. Set was in the far pasture. Of course he was. Vera rode up on a bay horse with her back straight as a board, and her expression, the expression of a woman who had decided what she thought about something before she arrived and was doing this visit as due diligence to confirm a conclusion already reached. She was 50 or so, handsome in a way that had gone from warm to careful over the years. Everything about her was pressed and deliberate right down to the riding gloves she removed one finger at a time after dismounting. Behind her, a girl of about 16 with her mother's sharp nose and softer eyes. This one looked at everything with interest instead of judgment, which was already an improvement. "Mrs. Calloway," Vera said, crossing the yard. The name landed strange. Nora was still getting used to it. "Mrs. Stott," Nora said. She didn't move from where she was standing. "Let her come." "And Miss Lily." The girl nodded quickly, friendly. "Lily Stott." "Come in," Nora said. "Coffee's on." She led them inside, watched Vera take in the kitchen. The scrubbed floors, the organized shelves, the clean windows. The table set right. The dishes that didn't match but were stacked well. Watched Vera's mouth tighten slightly, which meant she'd been hoping for worse. Nora put cups on the table. The cups she'd found wrapped in newspaper in the back of the top shelf. China, painted with tiny roses. Pretty in the way of something that had been bought carefully and used rarely. "These were May's," Vera said immediately. Her voice warmed just slightly. "I remember when she ordered them. She had such lovely taste." Nora poured coffee. "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman," she said. She meant it as a neutral statement. Said it that way. Vera looked at her across the rim of her cup. "She was accomplished," Vera said. "Could play piano, spoke some French. Her needlework won prizes at the county fair." She paused with the timing of someone who knew how to land a sentence. "She loved this place." Nora said. Jacob Set was devoted to her. "I'm sure," Nora said. She had such plans. Wallpaper for the parlor, Curtains from St. Louis. Vera's eyes moved around the kitchen, the undecorated walls, the flour sack curtains that were functional and not decorative. It must have been difficult for her, the isolation. I imagine it was. You don't find it difficult. Nora looked at her over her own cup. Mrs. Stott, she said pleasantly, I've been in places considerably more isolating than this, and in every one of them there was more than enough work to keep from being lonely. She set down her cup. Would you like to see the root cellar I reorganized it last week? Vera blinked. Mama? Lily touched her mother's arm. Mrs. Calloway, could I see the chickens Gil Stott says you've gotten the red hen laying again? The girl flushed slightly. Gil mentioned it. Nora looked at the girl, 16 and blushing over a name. She hadn't forgotten what that felt like. It was just very far away. Come on then, she said, standing. We'll get eggs for your mother to take home. She left Vera to look around the kitchen if she wanted. There was nothing to find. Clean floors and organized shelves and a life that was assembling itself one practical decision at a time. Outside, Lily relaxed immediately. Is Gil a good friend of yours? Nora asked as they walked to the chicken coop. He's almost 16, Lily said, as if this answered the question. Mama thinks he's too young, but he's not a boy. No, Nora agreed. Almost 16 is not a boy. Lily looked at her. Do you think it's strange to like someone younger? Nora thought about this. I think, she said, the only things worth worrying about are, does he treat you well, and are you both old enough to know what you're doing? She reached into the nesting box. The first one you can probably answer now. The second one takes a few more years. Lily considered this. He carried my books without being asked, she said. Last spring. That's a start, Nora said. She collected 4 eggs and gave the basket to Lily, and they walked back to the house. When they returned to the kitchen, Vera was standing near the shelf with the china cups. Her expression shifted. Slightly. She was looking at something on the table. A small leather journal worn at the edges tied with a faded ribbon. Nora had never seen it before. She looked at Vera. Vera set down her coffee cup, pulled on her gloves. We really must be going, she said. Do tell Set we called. They rode off. Vera straight-backed and deliberate. Lily turning once to wave. Nora went back into the kitchen. Looked at the journal. It hadn't been there before they came. She picked it up. Felt the weight of it. Opened the cover. Inside, in careful, beautiful handwriting, May Calloway. Her book of days. Nora sat down. Vera hadn't forgotten it. She'd left it on purpose. Precise as a slap. A quiet domestic slap delivered with china cups and a smile. The smart thing was to put it aside. Give it to Set when he came in. Let him decide. Nora's fingers were already untying the ribbon. She opened to the first page. January 1st, 1879. Today Jacob smiled at me, and I felt like my life was beginning. I had been so afraid that coming here was a mistake, that I wasn't made for this. But when he smiled like that, I thought, yes, this is where I'm supposed to be. Nora turned the page. February, 1879. The wind today. I had not understood wind before Texas. Back home it was weather. Here it's a presence, a thing that has opinions about you. I tried to tell Jacob how it made me feel, and he looked at me with kindness, but I could see he didn't quite understand what I meant. He loves this wind, has always loved it. I'm trying to learn to love it too. Nora sat with that for a moment. She loves what she doesn't love. She's trying to become someone else. March. I painted flowers on the wall by the kitchen window today. Small ones in yellow and blue. Jacob said they were pretty. He said it the way a man said things were pretty when he was not sure about them, but could see that they mattered to you. I love him. I love how hard he tries to meet me where I am. April. I am tired in ways I don't know how to explain. Not the good tired of work done, the other kind. May, I found a recipe for lemon cake from back home. I'm going to make it for Jacob's birthday. Maybe that will help. Nora read. She read the whole spring and then the summer and then September and October, May's handwriting growing slightly less careful as the months went on, as if she was writing faster or with less supervision of herself. November. I think I'm with child. I haven't told Jacob yet. I want to be sure. I want it to be real before I say it out loud. December 2nd. Told Jacob. He held me and didn't say anything for a long time, and when he pulled back, his eyes were bright. I've never seen them bright like that before. It made me think this is what joy looks like on a man who doesn't show it much. I want to remember this. December 20th. Sick in the mornings. Jacob hovers. I'm not used to being hovered over. I'm trying to let him. January. The baby is moving now. I can feel it. Every time it moves, I think there is a person in there who has never been hurt yet, who doesn't know what's waiting. I want to protect them from all of it. I know I can't, but I want to. February. I'm afraid, just that. One line for the whole entry. I'm afraid. Nora sat for a long time. She thought about May, who had come from somewhere else, who had loved a man she was still learning, who had painted flowers on a kitchen wall because she was trying to make a place feel like home when it didn't feel like home yet. Who had been afraid? Who had tried? Who had died trying? Nora looked around the kitchen. No flowers on the wall here. She hadn't painted any. Not because she didn't like flowers, she did abstractly, but because she hadn't needed to. The house had already felt like work when she arrived, and work felt like home to her in a way that painting flowers on walls didn't. She hadn't needed to transform it. She'd just started operating in it. She thought about Thomas, who had also needed her to be someone she wasn't. To perform a kind of femininity she found exhausting, to be delicate and ornamental, and to want things like curtains from St. Louis. She'd failed at that too. But she'd failed differently than May had failed. May had tried and couldn't hold the shape. Nora had never tried. She put the journal down, looked at it. May was not her enemy. May was a woman who loved someone and tried to love the life that came with him and ran out of time. That was all. That was the whole of it. There was nothing to compete with and nothing to resent. She was still sitting there when she heard something. Herself. Crying. Quietly. Very quietly. The kind of crying that happened in the back of the throat when you hadn't planned it and weren't sure when it started. She let it happen. She sat in this kitchen. Her kitchen, their kitchen, whatever it was, and she let herself cry for about 2 minutes, which felt like a long time because she hadn't done it in months, and then it was done. She went and washed her face, put more wood on the stove, started thinking about supper. That was the day she understood she wasn't here to replace May. Wasn't here to be better than May. May had needed to be someone she wasn't, and it had cost her everything. Nora was just being herself. That was the whole enormous simple thing. She was just being herself in a place where that turned out to fit. That was enough. That was more than she'd had in years. Set came in at dusk, sun-worn and quiet. He sat down at the table. She put food in front of him. He looked at the journal, still on the table where she'd left it. His hands went still. "Vera," he said, not a question. "She left it," Nora said. "I don't think she forgot it." "No," he said. "She wouldn't forget it." He looked at it for a moment. "You read it?" "Some of it." He was quiet. "She was—" He stopped, reached out and touched the cover, drew his hand back. She was trying to be something that wasn't in her. She knew she was trying. She wrote it down. He paused. "I didn't know she wrote it down." "She was honest about it," Nora said. "More honest in the writing than people usually are." "She was honest with me too," he said. "Just slowly. It came out slowly, and then there wasn't enough time left for all of it." He looked at the journal, then at the table. Her last words were, "Find someone stronger." Nora waited. "I thought she meant stronger physically," he said. "Tougher. Someone who could handle the work. He turned his coffee cup around. 3 years I thought that's what she meant. And now, he was quiet for a long time. Now I think she might have meant stronger at being herself, he said. Someone who didn't have to try so hard to be somewhere. Nora looked at him. He looked at the journal. You want to read the rest? He said. No, she said. He looked up. I read what I needed to, she said. The rest belongs to you. He was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up the journal. He stood from the table. He carried it to the stove, opened the iron door, and put it in. Not in anger, not with any dramatics. Just placed it in the fire the way you placed something when it was done being the thing it had been. He closed the door, came back to the table, finished his supper. Nora looked out the window at the Texas evening going purple at the edges. She thought the flowers May painted are gone. I don't know when he painted over them, but they're gone. She thought, but I'm still here. She thought that's not winning, that's just surviving. And then she thought surviving is enough. Surviving is a great deal. Surviving is more than May got. Outside, the bats had started their evening sweep over the barn roof. The chickens had gone quiet. The prairie stretched out in every direction, patient as stone. She washed the dishes. He went to the window and stood there looking at nothing. After a while he said, Burl Dempson sent a letter. She turned. About the marriage, he said. Wants to know if we're... He paused. It's been 2 weeks. Wants to know if it's settled. She dried her hands. What did you write back? Haven't yet. She hung the cloth. Write back that it's settled, she said. He looked at her. She looked at him. Write back that it's settled, she said again. Because it is. He nodded once. That slow, certain nod. Then the sky outside the window changed. In the space of a minute. In the space of less than a minute. It went wrong in the west. The color that had been golden at the horizon went green. Pale green. Wrong green. The kind of green that made your skin remember something your brain hadn't processed yet. The birds stopped, not gradually, all at once, like a signal. The chickens went quiet. The cattle in the near pasture started moving. Set was at the window already. Nora. His voice was different. She turned. He was looking at the western sky with an expression she hadn't seen before. Not fear. Something past fear. Something that had processed fear and come out the other side into a kind of terrible calm. Nora, he said, come here. She came. She looked at the sky. The horizon was gone. Where it had been was a wall, green-black, moving, low and rotating at the base, in a slow turn that shouldn't have been slow but somehow was the slowness of something enormous that looked slow because it was too big to look fast. At the bottom of that wall. Coming down. Cellar, he said. Now. 4 minutes. That was all the time between Set saying cellar and the cellar door slamming shut over their heads. 4 minutes to grab the lantern and the water bucket and the bread she'd made that morning for no reason, except that it was bread day and bread needed to be made. 4 minutes to run across the yard with the green sky pressing down and the air doing something wrong with the pressure. Something that made her ears feel thick. 4 minutes to get the cellar door open against the wind that was suddenly there and suddenly everywhere and fighting the door like it had opinions about where she was going. Set got the door. She went down first. He came down after and pulled the door shut over them and the latch caught and then the world above them turned into something she didn't have language for. Not wind, not thunder. A roar. The specific roar of something that didn't care. That had no opinion about the things in its path. That moved because it moved and took what was there because it was there. The cellar was small, dug deep, smelled of earth and old potatoes and the beeswax of the candles she'd put down here last week. The lantern swung from the beam she'd hung it on, throwing light that moved and moved and moved. She sat on the potato crate because that was the only thing to sit on. Set stood. Then the pressure changed. Her ears popped like she'd dove too deep in water. The lantern swung hard. Above them the cellar door shuddered, took a hit, rattled, held shuttered again. The roar was overhead now. Directly overhead. She pressed her hands against her ears. Didn't help. The sound wasn't coming in through her ears. It was coming up through the ground, through the potato crate, through the soles of her boots. It was in her chest, in her teeth, in the spaces between her ribs. Something hit the floor above them. Heavy, then heavier, then the sound of wood doing what wood wasn't meant to do. Set moved. She didn't see him cross the cellar. She just felt. It felt him, his hands on her arms and then his arms around her, pulling her against the back wall, covering her. She let him. She pressed her face against his shoulder and held on with both hands. And she did not think about Thomas. Did not think about the depot. Did not think about any of it. Just held on in the dark while the world above them came apart one piece at a time, wood shrieking and tin peeling away, and somewhere something that had been one thing becoming several smaller things. The roar got louder. Then it got enormous. And then above the enormous she heard him say her name. Not Mrs. Calloway. Not in that careful neutral tone he'd been using for 3 weeks. Just Nora. Said into her hair. Said like a fact he was making sure of. Said the way you said the name of something you were checking was still there. She tightened her hands in his shirt. He tightened his arms. The cellar door blew outward. Vanished. Just gone, ripped away the latch and the hinges and the whole assembly into the dark above them. The pressure that came down through that hole was like being pushed by something invisible and enormous. The lantern went out. Perfect dark. The roar filled every space in her head where a thought might have been, and she held on, and he held on, and the earth pressed up against them from below, and the sky pressed down from above, and she thought not in words exactly, but in the clarity that came when everything else was stripped away. I do not want to die here. Not here. Not like this. Not before. Before what? Before she found out what this was going to be. Then the roar moved on. Not suddenly, not all at once, but she could feel it going the way you felt a storm moving away, the particular recession of pressure, the sound dropping from enormous to merely very loud, to just wind, regular wind, the kind that had always been there. Her ears popped again. She could hear herself breathing. She could hear him breathing. The dark was total. She said, "Are you hurt?" He said, "No. You." "No." A pause. "It's past," he said. She didn't let go immediately. Neither did he. They stood in the dark cellar for another moment in what had been the shape of the emergency, but was now just the aftermath of it. The quiet. The loudest quiet she'd ever experienced. She let go of his shirt. He let go of her arms. She could hear his breathing in the dark. Even. Slower than it had been a moment ago. "Lantern," she said. "Matches are in my pocket." She heard him strike one. The small flame came up between them, throwing their faces in yellow light. And she looked at him, and he looked at her with the same expression on both of them. Something that was not quite relief, and not quite anything else. Something that had no name but existed in the space between almost and didn't. He lit the lantern. She picked up the bread which had somehow landed on the floor and was intact. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," she said. They climbed up out of the cellar into a world that was wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not wrong with everything in ruins and fire on the horizon. Just wrong in the particular way of real disasters, which was that some things were entirely untouched, and other things were completely gone, and the randomness of it was worse than if everything had been equal. The chicken coop was upside down 20 feet from where it had been. From under it came deeply affronted squawking. The barn was gone. Not damaged. Gone. Where it had been, there was a scatter of lumber and a confused cow standing in the wreckage doing what cows did when they were confused, which was stand very still and wait for someone to explain the situation. The south fence was down on two sides. A section of roof from somewhere was sitting in the kitchen garden, which meant the kitchen garden was done. And the lean-to. Nora turned to look. The lean-to was gone. The floor was still there, part of one wall. The hook she'd hung her second dress on was still in the wall, the dress still on, it remarkably flapping in the settling breeze. But the rest of it, the bed, the washstand, the bolt on the inside of the door, the flour sack curtains she'd hemmed, gone. She stood looking at where her room had been. Set stood beside her. The cornshuck mattress had somehow landed by the well 15 feet away. The bread knife she kept under it was nowhere visible. "My room," she said. He didn't say anything for a moment. "Main bedroom held?" he said. "Careful. Roof on that side. Both walls." She looked at where the lean-to had been. She thought about the bolt on the inside of the door. The specific relief of it. The first night in that room. The first night of her own space. The first time she'd bolted a door and felt the click of it, and understood that this was hers. Gone. "All right," she said. "Because it was gone, and that was the fact of it, and facts had to be dealt with before feelings if you wanted to get through." "All right," she said again. "What needs doing first?" He looked at her. She looked back. "Animals," she said. "Then fence. Then assess the rest." He nodded. They went to work. That was when Gil Stott came. She heard the horse before she saw him. Fast, too fast, the kind of riding that was more urgency than skill. The boy came around the stand of remaining cottonwoods on a horse that was blowing hard, his face cut in 3 places, his shirt torn to rags. "Mr. Calloway." He pulled up. "Tornado hit our place direct. Pa's trapped under the house. Ma sent me." Set was already moving toward the horse corral before Gil finished the sentence. "How bad?" He checked the fence still standing and went in for the 2 horses that hadn't scattered. "His legs. He was in the kitchen when it hit and the ceiling came down." Gil's voice was tight controlled for a 15-year-old in this situation. "Ma can hear him, but she can't get to him." "How many walls down?" "The whole east side. The main beam's on top of him." Nora was already in the barn, what remained of it, looking for what she could find. The shovel still there, leaning against the one standing wall. A pry bar she'd inventoried last week. Rope wrapped around the fallen pump handle, still usable. She brought them out. Set looked at the rope, looked at her. "Coming," she said. "It's not. Every hand," she said. "You need every hand. I know some doctoring." She paused. "And I know something about getting people out of collapsed structures." He looked at her. "You're going to have to trust me on that last part," she said. He took the rope. "Can you ride bareback?" "Since I was 12. They went. The Stott place was 1.5 miles north through a landscape that had been rearranged. The tornado's path was visible and precise. Everything on one side intact, everything on the other side not. Trees stripped clean. A wagon wheel in a tree 20 feet up. The fence line that marked the property edge just gone posts and wire vanished like they'd never been. The Stott house looked like it had been picked up and set back down wrong. Walls at angles that hurt to look at. The roof in the yard. One chimney still standing inexplicably without anything around it. Vera Stott stood at the edge of the wreckage with her riding clothes torn and her hair loose, and the expression of a woman who had been maintaining dignity by main force for the past half hour and was about to run out of force. When she saw them coming, something in her face broke open. "He's under the east wall," she said. "The main beam's across both legs. I can hear him." As if to confirm this from somewhere under the lumber, a sound. Not quite words. The sound of a man in serious pain trying not to make the sound he was making. 4 of the neighboring men had already arrived. They were standing around the wreckage with the helpless energy of people who understood the problem, but not the solution. Nora handed her horse to Gil and walked to the edge of the collapse. She looked at it, carefully, systematically. She was 14 years old when the feed store roof came down in the town where she'd grown up. She'd been 2 blocks away. She'd run toward it because she'd run toward things then before she learned better. She'd watched the men try to lift the main beam and watched the whole structure shift dangerously, and watched the man underneath scream when they dropped it, and watched her mother. Her mother, who was good at things that needed doing and didn't care who saw her doing them, go to her knees beside the rubble and say, "Tunnel. Don't lift. Tunnel." They'd gotten him out. He'd lost 2 fingers and walked with a limp for the rest of his life. But he'd lived. Nora crouched and looked at the base of the collapse, the main beam, the load it was carrying, the 2 walls that were leaning against each other, damaged but not entirely down. "We can't lift the main beam," she said, not loudly, clearly. "If we lift it, the east wall shifts and comes down on him. We'd lose him." The men looked at each other. Set looked at her. "What then?" one of the men said. "We tunnel," she said. "Shore up the sides as we go. Create a space underneath without moving the main load. Pull him out sideways. That takes time. Less time than if the east wall comes down." A pause. The sound from under the rubble. Low. Continuous. "Ned." Vera's voice cutting through. "Ned, we're coming. Just hold on." The men looked at each other again. Then one of them looked at Set. Set said, "Listen to her." And that was that. She directed it. Not from behind, from the front, from beside, from wherever she needed to be to see what was happening and what needed to happen next. She told Gil to find the longest fence posts he could and bring them for bracing. She told the bigger man, Henley, from the neighboring property to start clearing loose debris from the left side, specifically the left side not touching the center load. She told Set where to place the first brace and how deep to drive it. She'd never done this before. She'd seen it once. But she understood the logic of it, understood it in the same way she understood the root cellar organization, or the feed fitting, or the chicken feed schedule, which was that if you paid attention to what things were and how they worked, you could usually figure out what they needed. The shoring took 20 minutes. She counted every one of them. Ned Stott's voice from under the rubble got quieter as the minutes went by. That wasn't good. She worked faster. When the tunnel was short enough, she sent the thinnest of the men in first to check Ned's condition and report back. He came back out gray-faced. "Both legs," he said quietly. "Broken, one bad." She looked at Set. "You'll have to pull him out straight," she said. "Rope under his arms. Steady pull, no jerking, and someone will have to guide his legs." "Who guides the legs?" "Me," she said. "I'm smallest and I know what I'm looking for." "Those legs move wrong." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm doing it." He tied the rope. She went into the tunnel. The space was tight and close and smelled of old plaster and fear and something she didn't want to think about. She could see Ned Stout's legs, one folded wrong in a way that meant the bone had moved, the other swollen badly, but mostly together. Both of them trapped under the beam at the knee and below. "Mr. Stott," she said. "I'm Nora Calloway, Set's wife. We're going to pull you out now. You need to stay as still as you can." A sound from him. "Good," she said. "That's good. Ready when you are." She positioned her hands on his legs, one on each, not gripping hard. She knew better than to grip the broken places hard, but they're holding ready to guide. "Pull," she called back. The rope went taut. Ned Stott made the sound a person made when pain went past what they could process. She watched his legs. The bad one wanted to rotate. She corrected it, kept it aligned, kept it going straight. The other one was coming through the tunnel easier. She walked backward on her knees in the cramped space, keeping her hands steady, keeping the legs straight. He came out. Not fast, not in a rush, slow and steady. When they were clear of the tunnel, when she was on open ground again, Nora sat back on her heels and took 3 breaths. Then she looked at the legs. The bad one, the left one. The bone had moved. It would need to go back before they could properly splint it. She'd seen her mother do this. She knew what it sounded like and what it required, and she was absolutely not looking forward to it. "Doctor," she said. "Nearest is 20 miles, one of the men said. She'd expected that. "Then someone bring me straight wood for splints and clean cloth and whatever carbolic you have. she said, "and someone needs to hold his shoulders." Vera Stott was already there, looking at her husband on the ground, face the color of old chalk, then looking up at Nora. "What do you need from me?" Vera said. "Hold his hands," Nora said. "Talk to him. Keep him focused on your voice." Vera sat down in the wreckage, took Ned's hands. "Ned," she said, "look at me. Just look at me." His eyes found her. Nora set the legs, though she did the right one first because it was the easier one, and she needed to start somewhere. Then the left, which was not easy and required Set to hold the thigh while she worked the lower portion back into position by feel and memory and prayer, and the particular stubbornness of a woman who had run out of other options. Ned Stott passed out during the second one, which was mercy. When it was done, she sat back and her hands were shaking. She noticed this from a distance. She let them shake. She'd earned it. "Clean cloth," she said. "We need to keep the wounds clean. Carbolic twice a day until the doctor comes. He cannot move those legs for weeks, at minimum." One of the men was already riding for the doctor. Vera Stott sat beside her husband with his hands in hers, and after a moment she looked up at Nora. Not with the expression she'd come in with on Saturday, not with the evaluation and the judgment and the china cups being a test, with something different entirely. She said, "I was wrong about you." Nora looked at her. "Nora, I came that day to I don't know what I was doing." Vera's voice was rough. She'd been crying at some point. "I was protecting something. May. The memory of May. What this place was supposed to be." She looked at her husband's face, unconscious and pale. "I told someone in town that you were here alone some mornings. I didn't mean—" "I know," Nora said. "Rex Hadley heard it and he—" "I know," Nora said. "It's done." Vera looked at her. "May would have liked you," she said. "I think. Not because you're like her. Because you're what she always—" She stopped. She was always trying to be tougher than she was. She thought toughness was something you performed. She didn't know you could just have it. Nora was quiet for a moment. "She was honest," Nora said. "In what she wrote. She was more honest than most people are." Vera blinked. "You read the diary?" "Some of it." "And—" Nora thought about what to say. "She loved him," she said. "She tried hard. She was brave in the ways that she knew how to be." She looked at Ned's face. "That's not nothing." Vera was quiet for a moment. "No," she said. "It's not." They rode home in the last of the daylight. Set on one side, Nora on the other, the horses walking slow, because slow was all anyone had left. The Calloway place came into view as the sun finished its descent. What remained of it spread in the evening light, half standing and half scattered across the September grass. She looked at it. He looked at it beside her. "Barn's gone," he said. "Yes." "Lean-to's gone." "Yes." "South fence is down. Kitchen garden's done for the season." "Yes." A pause. "Main bedroom's standing," he said. "Both walls. Roof." "I saw." He was quiet for a moment. "House still works," he said. "Does it?" she said. She meant more than the house, and he knew it. He dismounted. She dismounted. They put the horses in what remained of the corral. The chickens, when she went to right the coop, turned out to be entirely fine. All 5 hens and the rooster, indignant but uninjured, ruffled up and full of grievances about the quality of their afternoon. She fed them from the grain that had spilled from the barn debris. Set started pulling usable lumber from the barn wreckage as the last light faded. Not because it needed to happen now, because his hands needed to do something. She found the lamp, found matches, got a light going, found the food she'd put in the cellar 3 days ago for no reason except that it seemed sensible, and set to making something that would call itself supper. He came in when the dark was full, sat at the table. She put food in front of him. They ate without talking, but this was different from the usual quiet. This was the quiet after something big, the quiet that replaced noise with understanding. After a while he said, "You've done that before. The rescue." I've seen it done, she said. Once. I was 14. And you remembered it. I tend to remember things that work. He was quiet. You kept your head, he said. Every part of it. Hadley the night at the door today. He looked at his plate. I haven't known many people who don't panic, who think when they should think and feel when it's safe to feel and know the difference. She thought about this. I've had a lot of practice, she said. Not panicking. It started a long time ago. He nodded. They cleared the table. She washed the dishes. He sat at the table after and didn't go to his room. She noticed, but didn't say anything about it. Just finished the dishes and hung the cloth and stood there for a moment. Lean-to's gone, she said. Yes. Main bedroom has 2 walls and a roof. Yes. She was quiet. He was quiet. We're adults, she said. Yes. We've already been through the cellar, she said. In the dark, holding on. Yes. This is simpler than that. He looked up at her. She held his gaze. It doesn't have to mean anything tonight that you're not ready for it to mean, she said. It just has to mean there's a roof and a bed and we're both tired and we've earned it. He was quiet for a long moment. It already means more than that, he said. She waited. The cellar, he said. When the door went, yes. I said your name. I heard. He looked at his hands on the table. I hadn't said anyone's name like that since... He stopped. For a long time. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. She looked at him. He looked at her. I read your listing 3 weeks ago, he said, in Dempson's office. I went in for something else, and it was on the desk, and he was out of the room, and I read it. I know, she said. You said. I didn't say what I read. He turned his coffee cup around, not drinking, just moving it. Returned after 3 years, unable to have children. No family contact since separation. Previous employer references available. He paused. Good with figures, a note said. Good with children despite circumstances. Works without being supervised. She waited. I put it down, he said. Went on about my business. Went home. Fed the cattle. Made supper. Went to bed. He looked up. Didn't sleep. She said nothing. Got up at 3 a.m, he said. Went back to town. Read it again. Something in her chest shifted. Something she'd been keeping very still. 3 years of empty is a long time, she said. It's not that, he said, or not only that. He looked at her directly with the eyes that had looked at her hands first that first day. Returned after 3 years. No family contact since. Works without being supervised. He paused. You'd been through something bad and you'd kept going, without anyone making you. Without anyone waiting for you to. He stopped. I don't know why that... Because it's rare, she said. Yes. Because most people after something like that stop, she said. Or shrink. Or wait for someone to tell them it wasn't their fault. Yes. And I didn't. No, he said. You didn't. She looked at the table. I thought about stopping, she said. After my father's newspaper, after my mother's door. There was a month where I thought about it. She was quiet for a moment. But I'd been taught my whole life that the work was the thing. That if you were working, you were existing. That if you were useful, you were real. She paused. So I went on being useful. And now? She looked up. Now I'm trying to figure out if that's enough, she said. If being useful is enough, if a person is allowed to want more than just to be necessary. He was very still. The morning after the first night, she said, I put 2 cups on the table. I didn't decide to. I just did it. And then I thought about it after why I'd done it and I couldn't answer clearly. She looked at him. I'm asking if it was right. He was quiet for a long time. Outside, an owl was calling somewhere in the remaining cottonwood trees. The cattle had settled. The prairie was doing what it did in the dark, going enormous and quiet. "When I came to the depot," he said, "I didn't know what I was expecting. I thought I was being practical. I thought I was solving a problem." He paused. "And then you were standing there and the whole room was waiting for you to break and you didn't break." "I thought about it," she said. "I know," he said. "That was the whole point. You thought about it and chose not to. That's different from not feeling it." She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "It is." They sat with that for a moment. The lamp burned between them lower now, throwing warmer light as the oil got down. He reached across the table. Not to take her hand. Just put his on the table, palm up. Not a demand. An offer. The same thing he'd done at the depot when he'd given her the choice. Still giving her the choice. She looked at his hand. The hands she'd held steady at the water trough when they shook. The hands that had brought her leather gloves from town because he'd remembered what size they were. She put hers in his. His fingers closed around hers. Not tight. Just there. "The bedroom holds 2 walls and a roof," he said. "Yes," she said. "And we're adults." "Yes." "And you've already been through the cellar with me in the dark." "Yes." He looked at her. She looked at him. "Come on then," he said. And she did. In the morning she got up before he did, which was unusual, and which she suspected would probably not happen again for some time, because he was constitutionally unable to stay in bed past the birds, and the birds were vocal about the hour. She put coffee on. She stood at the kitchen window and looked out at what was left and what wasn't, and what was going to need to happen in what order. The barn first. She'd worked a barn raising once with her aunt's family back when she still had family who would have her. She remembered enough. Set would know more. The fence. She'd helped mend fence before. That she could do. The kitchen garden was a loss for this season, but seeds for spring could be ordered. She was good at planning orders, the lean-to. She thought about the lean-to. She thought about the bolt on the inside of the door that was somewhere in a field a quarter-mile from here. She thought about the room that Seth had built before he knew who was coming, because he'd understood that whoever came would need a space of her own. She didn't need it the same way now. She understood that. But she thought she would ask him to build a door with a bolt on the inside of the main bedroom when they rebuilt, just for the principle of it. She was still thinking about this when she heard him in the doorway. She didn't turn. "Coffee's ready," she said. Boots on the floor. The sound of him at the wash basin. The sound of 2 people in one kitchen, which was a sound she'd had once a long time ago and lost and found again in a way she hadn't expected and still wasn't sure she fully deserved. But she was working on deserving it, which was the closest she knew how to get to deserving something. He poured his coffee. She turned. He was looking at her the way he'd looked at her hands. Not assessing. Not admiring. Not calculating. Just there you are. I see you. "What do we start with?" she said. He looked out the window at the wreckage. "Fence," he said. "Cattle first, then fence." "I can do fence." "I know you can. And we should write to the lumber yard about the barn." Already thinking about it. "And the lean-to." "We'll rebuild it," he said. "When we rebuild." She looked at him. He looked at her. "With a bolt on the inside," he said. She breathed. "Yes," she said. They drank their coffee, and then they went outside into the September morning to start putting the pieces back where they belonged. Not where they'd been, where they belonged, which was not the same thing, and she was beginning to understand the whole point. Nora Vane had come to Millerton with a carpet bag that was light as resignation, and a face she'd practiced keeping still, and a body that had been told it wasn't good enough by everyone who was supposed to know. She'd stood on a platform while the whole room made its conclusion about her. She'd stood straight, and then a man had walked through the crowd and looked at her hands and seen the thing she was actually doing, which was holding on to nothing and refusing to let go. And he'd said this one, and she'd said all right, and they had both been wrong about what they were agreeing to, and they had both been right about what they were agreeing to. And here they were, in the September light, in the Texas morning, in a yard that was half wreckage and half standing and entirely theirs, starting with the fence. Which was, as it happened, the right place to start, because you couldn't have anything else until you knew where things began and ended. That was the first thing her father had taught her before the newspaper and the closed door. That was the one thing that survived the closing. You started with the fence, and then you built from there.